quite devastating for the government, isn't it? Particularly for the Prime Minister. This is something like the fifth MP who's having to reconsider his position following sort of allegations of sexual misconduct. It's not a good record, is it?
It's not a good record, it's not a good look, and it just is starting to feel never-ending. When governments start to get into these sleaze cycles, when it's one or two stories, it can feel like, OK, well, that's an exception. At the moment, the exceptions feel like the people who aren't breaking the rules in some way or another. This has been an ongoing story since Oliver Dowden, for very different reasons, was forced out. It just doesn't seem to stop at any point. And I think there are really serious questions to be asked about how the Conservatives are vetting their candidates. I would say, and I would really stress, it's not just a Conservative problem. This is there's been problems in other parties. But at the moment, I mean, it just seems to be of orders of magnitude greater in the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
And I do worry that the fact that we have accepted poor behaviour from the Prime Minister means that it's very hard not to accept poor behaviour from everybody below him.
Yeah. Do you think the criticism's fair about the delay in suspending the whip from Chris Pincher? It broke sort of Thursday night, and then it wasn't until yesterday evening that the whip was suspended.
I think there's two things that you should separate out here. The delay is probably down to process. Processes do take time. And actually, when somebody's accused of something, even when they've accepted, and in his letter, Chris Pincher accepted that he'd behaved badly, there does need to be a proper process because everyone is due to have good process, good justice. What baffles me is why Number 10 came out swinging in his defence in the middle of that process. That's not good justice. That's not good process at all. So why they came out saying, oh, well, he's resigned, he shouldn't have the whip removed, it's all over now, nothing to see here. Knowing, they must have known. How could they not have known that that just couldn't and wouldn't hold?
This acceptance of poor behaviour, or, yes, I suppose you could say the acceptance of different behaviour, do you think there's any argument for saying it started when this Prime Minister moved into Number 10 Downing Street with a woman who wasn't his wife while he was still married elsewhere, and that sort of just filters on down?
I wouldn't make that argument. I think there's a great deal to criticise Boris Johnson over. As a divorced woman, I'm not going to start to judge people's marital fidelity, other than my own ex-husband's. But I do think it's not really about how we treat the other individuals in our lives. If it's consensual, which obviously Boris Johnson and Carrie Johnson's relationship is, I think the bigger problem is many of the other moral failings of this Prime Minister that were not about his personal, highly colourful personal life. Having an affair is one thing. It's not a great thing, particularly if you're the wronged party. But it's not the same as this allegations of groping, which is completely non-consensual.
Yeah, but the fact is, as we were just saying, the fifth MP to have to reconsider their position after allegations of sexual misconduct, and in some cases proof of that, is not a good look. But you have to look upwards, don't you, and say the rot comes down from the top.
Yeah, I think there's a question of Boris Johnson's libertinism that maybe has in himself manifested in a certain sexual incontinence, shall we say, but his also just laissez-faire attitude to people behaving poorly. And that has obviously reflected extremely badly on his time as Prime Minister and on this record number of cases where people are accused, people are found guilty of really quite extraordinarily bad things.
Can he do anything now to rescue it? John Major faced a similar problem in his time. He, even despite launching a campaign to sort of get back to basics, it didn't work, did it?
Well, John Major signed his own death warrant with his Back to Basics campaign because it literally opened himself up to every journalist in the country seeking out as many stories as they could possibly find that could be then ushered in to show what hypocrisy Back to Basics was. Boris Johnson has many, many flaws. I suspect one of them is not actually hypocrisy, in that he's not going to go around pretending that he's whiter than white on these issues. But that brings its own problems. That brings its own trouble. Boris Johnson is going to get into and is in a spiral now where I can't see him rescuing it. What is his option? He can't go for a back to basics approach, as you say. The country would laugh him out of office. He can't seem to turn the page. We don't know how many more of these stories there are lined up. There is still, as we know, an unnamed Conservative MP who is being investigated under rape allegations. That's another one yet to burst. And there's probably a whole load happening under the surface we don't yet know about. Westminster is a gossipy, cliquey place. A lot of these stories come out, and once that dam has started to crack, the burst just floods through. And I think that's where we're at, and that's where the Prime Minister's at. And I just don't see him getting his head over water on this.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.